Hello, everyone. We probably have some people shuffling in late today because we made a last minute change to the Zoom link. So I appreciate your patience with the change of link. Give maybe folks just one more second to join. Okay, well, oh, here's another person. Let me let them in. I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. Appreciate everyone's patience with the change of Zoom link at very last minute. We had a little bit of issue with the other link and getting locked out of the Zoom account, so we appreciate you all kind of bearing with us here. But we'll get started as we have our speaker here, Annalisa Tanner. Annalisa is the current food service director of Boston Public Schools and also a former colleague of mine at the Chef Ann Foundation. And she'll be talking about budgeting tools. And Annalisa, I'll just pass it over to you if you want to get started. And apprentices, if you could just put your name and district in the chat for her, and we could get kicked off.
Sure, happy to. Welcome everybody. I'm excited to share about food service finance. I've been a food service director in 3 different states and really have had to focus on finance in all of those places. So I'm gonna put up my slides. So our objective today is to help develop a basic understanding of school food finance. We'll go through how finance has anything to do with scratch cooking, look at a profit and loss statement, and take a little bit of discussion around meal counts and labor costs, and then food costs. So the first thing is we'll jump right in. What does finance have to do with scratch cooking? Um, there's such a focus on the food, which makes sense. But underlying all of that is the finance. Since school food service departments are usually the only department in a school district that are earning revenue and are revenue based, knowing your numbers is really important. It helps you plan for your program sustainability. Generally, school districts are um, requiring food service departments or expecting food service departments to either break even or turn a profit. And so being able to explain your numbers, know your numbers, helps to make sure that your administration and the other partners in the district really have trust in you running your department and view as a partner instead of something that has to be managed. And then knowing your numbers helps you to clearly articulate that financial impact of any proposed modifications to your program and measure the success of your changes. So if you want to switch to a whole muscle raw chicken so that you can do, more scratch cook recipes with chicken, understanding the impact of making that switch in terms of the numbers and the cost, and then being able to share the cost impact after the fact is going to help you be more successful, particularly because superintendents and business officers are looking at managing the district in terms of numbers. So as well, when you have a solid budget management, you get to be proactive rather than reactive. That means you're planning change rather than having to spend all of your time sort of following up to not having a plan in place. It helps you to prevent that loss in program funding or deficit spending, or be able to communicate it ahead of time. Again, to build that trust or to help everyone plan so that uh, the money is there to pay your people and for buying the food and not taking away from teaching and learning. And then creating your budget gives you a roadmap to achieve your goals to help you improve the meals that you serve. So any questions about finance as related to scratch cooking before we move into the numbers? So there's three main data sets that we look at when we're building a budget and managing a budget in food service. The first is meal counts, which is really related to your revenue. And then the other two are your expenditures, your food cost and your labor cost or your position control. And so a profit and loss statement is the report that food service directors and business officers look at every month and to understand how the department is doing from a financial perspective. And so your revenue, so the money coming in minus your expenditures, the money going out, equals either your profit or your loss. It's very similar to a personal bank account, just a lot bigger numbers and much more complicated accounting. So your beginning balance, so like that's the money you have in the bank account, plus your revenue, plus your incoming money, minus what you've spent equals your ending balance. And so that's sort of the number you're looking for the end of year to know whether you've made money or the district is going to have to supplement food service. So we're gonna switch right now just to take a quick look at what profit and loss statement looks like. A lot of numbers. This this profit and loss statement shows 5 years. And so often you're looking at a comparative version of your P&L, profit and loss statement, so that you can identify trends and sort of explain when you've changed something or how you're doing, or if things haven't changed, helping to justify that this is the normal trend. And so in a profit and loss statement, you'll see the revenue is always up at the top. We have our different kinds of revenue, our different reimbursements, and then our cash sales from our students who pay for meals, adult sales, a la carte sales, other income, grants, and then we show our commodities on our profit and loss statements because that's value that you're getting in. It is equivalent of money. And so then you'll see all of that together comes up with what our total revenue is. And so in the first column here, we have the budget. So this was our plan. And then we have what actually happened. So in this year, 2018-19 in this district, we planned that we would earn 2.3 million and we actually did better at 3.4 million. And when we go through and look, it's because we brought in more lunches. We were serving more lunch than we expected to. Also more breakfast than we expected to. You can see the number is bigger. So that is fairly good, except you want to get as close as possible so that you can plan to spend as much of the money that you have coming in a planned out responsible way. Under revenues, we'll have our expenditures, and then it'll be each type. Usually labor comes first, so we'll have our salaries, taxes, retirement, health and welfare, which is health insurance, and then other would really depend on your district. Sometimes that's other benefits that you have. Sometimes it's your substitute labor. Sometimes it's your overtime labor. Here in ours, we have a labor subtotal, and then we're looking at the cost percentage of labor as cost and then the labor revenue. And we're going to come back and look at these again. Then we have food and our commodities here. So we have the commodities in the revenue and in the expenditure, so they wash each other out, but we are taking a look and highlighting that they have a value that we're relying on to serve our meals. And then under that, we have all kinds of different miscellaneous costs, our direct costs. And then finally, our total expenditures. And so we can see we were using this year. In this year, we brought in 3.4 million and we spent 2.6 million. So we had around 800,000 of profit in this year, even though we had planned that we were going to lose $500,000. We started out the year with 627, and then because of this 800,000, we ended up with a balance of 1.4 million. And to some respect, that's good. We want to carry a little bit of a balance around 3 months. The USDA currently allows 6 months. But we also want to recognize that we want to make sure that we're spending what we're earning and really reinvesting in the program. And so this gives us the opportunity to probably spend more on on, different menu items or more for labor, for example. Okay, so any questions about profit and loss statements before I move on? I know that with numbers, it's a lot to absorb. So we'll keep going. So meal counts are the first sort of input that we're going to take a look at. Meal counts help you project your program revenue. They help you measure the success of your program. If you're serving more meals, it means you're achieving goals of feeding your students. We look at our average daily participation by site and by eligibility. So we're looking at average daily participation, not total meals, because in each month we have different number of serving days. So we want to have some parity at what we're looking at. And then, of course, we want to look at eligibility so we understand if we're serving the needs of our students who are depending on us the most. And then this looking at our meal counts gives us the opportunity to serve more students and really understand where we need to take a look. So I'm going to go back over to the spreadsheet now and show just an example of taking a look at different at our meal counts. So in this school district with all of our funny names, we have our enrollment and we have our total meals and we have our, when we scroll over, we have our average daily participation. And this is coming from, I'll just kind of scroll down really quick, down below. For every month, we fill in the meals here. So I think this was August, and we put in the number of free meals, reduced meals, and paid meals for breakfast and lunch. And every month, underneath, there's more months. It populates up here so that we have our average dailies. And so we would take a look and see at each school what our participation was in each eligibility category and sort of identify where we might want to take a look. So like at this high school, less than 60% of our kids who receive free meals are eating. We might want to take a look into that and see why. And then we would be able to see at Savory Elementary, for example, they're serving 79% of their students who receive free meals, as well as at Trumpet, that's pretty high. Would want to take a look. What are they doing? What best practice can we move from, use from these places? And so we might say to one of the lower performing schools, like at Spicy Elementary, look at Trumpet Elementary, that 84% of their kids eat. It's because of their kids who are receiving free meals because of breakfast in the classroom. We probably could be serving about 20% more of your kids. So this kind of information can help you talk with administrators to make program changes. And so we do the same thing at lunch to see where, what our participation is like. And so we're looking for, in the elementary schools, around 80% of students eating. And so in this district, we're pretty good. We would take a look at Strong Roots Elementary to find out what's going on there. And I like to look at it by both the eligibility and then the total as well. Using these meal counts, it lets us also project our revenue. And so we can see down here, based on our average daily meals, we have a formula in here that projects how we'll finish the year. And so we can see we're on target to be just a $3,000 more in reimbursement revenue than we thought we would be, which is great. That's pretty spot on. Looking at your revenue based on your meal counts helps you know whether you're on track or you need to let your administrators know something's not working out, or if you need to make some mid-year changes. It's also important to use your actual meal counts and your projected meal counts for the next year to do your budget, rather than just rolling over your numbers from the year before. Because if you have enrollment changes or program changes, that's really going to change your revenue. And again, you want to get your spending as much in line with what your revenue projection is, so that you're really taking advantage of all the dollars you have. So that's meal counts. Any meal count or revenue related questions before we move on? Okay. So the next topic area is labor cost. Um, and so labor is generally your biggest expense. Often it's about the same as food. And uh, sorry, I'm just noticing that we had some questions in the chat.
Yeah, we just had, just as you started, a question came in, but Georgina's just asking about how you handle budget concerns if there's like any sort of disaster.
Um, so I think you can often have a contingency area or for, in your repair. I think if the roof of your building collapses, that's actually not a food service related expense. Anything that happens to the building should be in the facilities budget. And actually, food service funds can't go to repair the actual structures. They can only, to think about it is if you took the building and you shook it upside down, the things that fall out are what food service um, can pay for. I think you would have some money in your, in your repair and maintenance budget. And then generally for a disaster, the district would have other funding. Um, I think that generally you don't get so close to a zero balance. And that's why I said that it's a good idea to carry about 3 months of fund balance if you're able to. So that I'm thinking more along the lines if there's a government shutdown and we get our reimbursements late, that you have cash to float your payroll with. But it could be the same thing that if you have 3 to 6 months of fund balance, you have that as that's sort of like your emergency fund um, if your roof collapsed. I hope that's a hypothetical question for you, Georgina, and that didn't happen to you. Um, okay, Erica, if there's another question in the chat, will you call it out for me since I
Yeah,
don't
no
see?
worries. I'll keep an eye on it. So,
Okay, cool. Thanks. Okay, so labor cost. For labor cost,
oh, and sorry,
instead of
Annalisa, you're not in presenting mode anymore. If you would mind going back to, yes, thank you.
okay,
Just it's a little bit bigger.
yeah,
Perfect.
thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so for labor cost, again, often business offices will roll over the cost from one year to the next. I'm always recommending that we calculate the actual projected costs. And so you want to calculate the cost of your individual staff and your sites. And then we're always looking to see if our sites are staffed appropriately with the necessary skill level and hours. And the HR department usually can provide a detailed breakdown of the staffing costs associated with program change. Often in the budgeting process, the HR or the business office provides your labor cost for you. But the way that we kind of take a look to make sure that our costs are in line and we have the right amount of labor everywhere is using meals per labor hour. And so meals per labor hour are helpful to compare the parity of labor between sites so that you make sure that you're assigning the same sort of amount of responsibility and hustle from one site to another. They help us assess our ability to sustain our current labor hours and evaluate potential effects of staffing shifts or changes to the production model, as well as a site's ability to take on new programs or increased participation. So, if you have a school with who wants to do breakfast in the classroom or is having a larger enrollment and your site's already at their meals per labor hour target, then you'll have to add labor. Whereas if they're under target, you would know that they're able to take on more volume without more labor. And then the meals per labor hour calculation also gives you a logic for balancing staffing among sites and is really helpful for helping staff understand why a site may or may not receive more labor. And then really important, it's a tangible illustration for administrators and for our unions when we're seeking approval to add or reduce labor. Again, I think a lot of the sort of magic of finance is it's a way to help explain why the direction we're heading in or the direction we want to go is, a good idea or how it makes sense. So the way to calculate meals per labor hour, it's pretty straightforward. It's what it sounds like. You take your total meal equivalents and you divide it by the total number of assigned labor hours in the school. So meal equivalents, the Chef Ann Foundation, we calculate through the breakfast line. So is a third of a meal. Breakfast in the classroom, we attribute 2/3 of a meal, and snack is a quarter. Because it doesn't take as much time or labor to put cereal out on the line as it does to make a sandwich or make a stew, for example. And then we don't include a la carte in our meals per labor hour calculations because we're very much focused on the reimbursable meal and making sure that all kids have access to the healthy food and scratch made foods. So here in this chart, you can see a couple things around the schools. We look at the number of positions, we have their total daily hours here, and then their meal equivalents. And so we would be able to see in this school district, we have quite a spread where we have one elementary here. We're producing 36 meals for every single labor hour attributed in the or allocated to the school. While at the same time, this other elementary here is producing 15. So often there's a reason. There could be that there's an alternative school, or maybe we have some other reason. But without more information, I would say that somebody from this school up here, one of these 4 people, could be moved to the school down here to help bring everybody a little bit closer into parity. And then we would see that our middle schools here at the bottom are less productive than the elementaries. That's often what you see because the middle schools are sometimes, and especially in this district, we're producing more different options than the elementary schools. So if they're producing 4 options a day and the elementaries are producing 2, or the middle schools have 2 or 3 or 4 lines and the elementaries only have 1 line, you do need more people. So that's pretty normal to see. But even within the middle schools, we have one producing 9 meals per labor hour while the others are doing, 11, 15, and 16. And so I would want to look into that to make sure, that we're requiring this sort of same amount of work from one school to another. We probably can also see where we have breakfast in the classroom at these schools with higher counts as well. So usually everybody's like, well, so what should my meals per labor hour be? Honestly, it has to be decided in each district, sort of based on your situation. So the types of positions that are assigned to each school and what unions those positions report to. In my kitchens here, I have 2 different unions in the kitchens. The production model, the type of foods and menu complexity, the number of entrees, like I mentioned, related to the middle schools, the type of breakfast service through the line of breakfast in the classroom. You would have more meals per labor hour for breakfast in the classroom. Number of meal periods, the time between them, how many service lines you have, if you're washing reusable dishes or not, and then, specific things to campuses. So you might have a meal per labor hour target for one group of campuses and a different target for another group. There's some general targets for scratch cooking. We're usually looking about 16 to 18, speed scratch 18 to 20, and heat and serve 20 to 22. And then we have our consolidated production there as well. So any other questions about labor or meals per labor hour before we move on to food cost? Okay. So we'll take a little bit of a look at food costs now. So your food cost is also a calculation. It's your beginning inventory. Again, very similar to like a personal bank account, plus your purchases, and then minus your transfers, minus your ending inventory, and that equals your food cost. So basically, we're not going to calculate into the food cost food we have not yet used. So taking accurate and complete inventories every month is really important, because since you can see in that calculation, the food that you have in inventory, that value isn't part of your food cost. If you don't take an accurate inventory, you don't get an accurate food cost. Uh, Food cost is generally about half of your budget, 40 to 50%. So it's sort of what you're aiming for. Again, it's important to calculate your annual food costs by vendor instead of rolling them over from year to year, especially as you change menu items. If you make any updates to your menu, change any type of product, if your food prices go up, you want to make sure that you're budgeting appropriately. You're going to look at whether you're going to remain in your budget or you're going to go over, and you want to be able to communicate that again ahead of time. I think the more you're able to communicate ahead of time, the more control you maintain of your department, instead of somebody from like the budget office coming in and saying, well, now you're going to do a heat and serve item because it's cheaper. And they don't know that much about the operational impacts, but they're just solely looking at the bottom line. When you are tracking your food costs, you can compare them to your prior year actuals, and then that gives you a great explanation of if you changed a product, if you went to local cucumbers and now your food, and you serve them every day or something, and now your food cost is 2 cents more, and you can attribute that to the cucumbers or not. Planning your food costs allows you to also maximize the use of your commodities and select commodities in the right categories. And then again, to measure the impact of menu changes. So I can't underline how important accurate production records are to food costs. We use our production records to forecast, which then our orders are based off of. And then what we produce obviously comes from the production records, how many servings. And so if you have accurate production records that are based on your past actuals, then you really save on food costs. If you have your sites sort of, for better or worse, phoning in the numbers, like we can see here, for sure, this cornbread was just estimated at 300 servings, 400 servings, 300 servings. That wasn't based on the past actuals, especially because we can see we're at 295, 400 we ran out, and then at 247. You end up ordering more than you need, carrying more in inventory, and then ultimately spending more. So again, what I would suggest is that there's a big emphasis on taking a look at what you actually served the time before. So if we look at here on January 10th for beef nachos, we planned 575, but the time before we served 579. So it doesn't really make any sense that we planned less than we served the time before. And then in fact, we served much more. Again, then the next time we planned less again, although in this time it worked out. And I think it is definitely difficult. You'll never know exactly, we'll never get it exact. I think that's the thing we hear all the time, and we can see it in the numbers. But I think we definitely need to remember that our food production records have a direct impact on our food cost and therefore our bottom line. And then I'd go through just like a little example of coming up with your food cost per serving. So as you're planning out your menus, you have a sense of that. And it is something that's really easy to do when you're doing a speed scratch and you're just the chicken patty and a bun. Those two things are really easy to cost out. when you begin making black meat tacos, for example, from scratch, then you have all of these different ingredients and how do you figure out the cost? And so on the lunchbox, there is this cost per serving tool where you put in each of your ingredients, you put in the case counts, the unit per case, the case cost, and then it will calculate for you the cost per unit. In the you'll put in your serving size or the amount in the recipe, and then the unit for that, and then there's a conversion tool, which then gives you the cost in the recipe, the total recipe cost, and then at the end, the cost per serving. So that this is how we figured out that our black bean tacos cost 84 cents per taco or per serving, so 2 tacos. And so that's another really important thing to do and know how to cost out your menu by serving. And so that's all of the food cost information. Any questions around food cost? And that's actually it from me.
Thank you, Annalisa. And sorry, my computer's being very, very laggy right now. So if it takes me a minute to get to the mute button, that is why. Any questions for Annalisa about any of the things she covered? I know budgeting tools can be very confusing and difficult, so we'll be sure to share out these slides afterwards as well.
And the spreadsheet that I was using for all of the budget planning, that's available on the lunchbox. So all those tools are there for you as well. And I think are really super useful.
Yes, they definitely are. And then I actually, this is not a question, but more of a call out. I know Tiffany, you had emailed me recently about like a financial project you're working on. So I was wondering if you'd mind sharing a little bit more about that with Annalisa in the group. You're muted, Tiffany. Tiffany, you were muted. I don't know if you can.
There we
There
go.
you. Yep.
Hi there. So it was the last virtual learning session that we had on finance, and it really inspired me to kind of just dig a little bit deeper and see what's going on with our district versus, what's going on with the district next door that is a heat and serve model. Our districts are fairly similar in size. Ours is a little bit larger. Um, and so I've contacted the other school district, and she is going to be giving me numbers on her food costs, and I'm hoping meal per labor hour also, just to see what her labor is and compare it to ours. And so this was just great timely information because I didn't really know the breakdown for how to calculate some of those calculations, meal per labor hour. So this is so valuable. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Tiffany. And then actually, Annalise, that is, I have a follow-up question kind of based on what Tiffany mentioned. In your work or in your role, how frequently have you really worked with other food service directors or others in the district to kind of work on these pieces? And do you find that to be helpful, reliable to kind of check in with other districts and what they're doing and that sort of thing as well?
Well, I definitely have asked for peers, not really next door, because in Boston, it's the largest district by far in the region. So it is a little bit different. And then here in Hawaii, we're the only school district. But I think it is helpful to, when I've done presentations to the unions or to our admin, to have the meals per labor hour or other information from similar size districts or nearby districts so that they kind of have some context that, why we're going to the direction we're going or why we're way off from everybody else or we're the same. So I think it is helpful, particularly when you're wanting to do some change management.
Great, thank you. Any other final questions for Annalisa today? Okay, well, honestly, we could let you go, but thank you so much for joining us. I know it's pretty late in your time zone right now, so I appreciate you having you. And apprentices, we'll just get wrapped up here a little bit early today. Thank you. All right, just to wrap us up, again, thank you everyone for your patience with the Zoom link. We will be sure to share out the recording for anyone who joined late because of the change. Just a reminder that our next virtual learning session is next Tuesday. So we will be slightly off the regular schedule. And we'll be meeting again on Tuesday because of Thanksgiving, since we don't have a virtual learning session that week. So that will be from 4 to 5 on the 18th next week. Other than that, my only other reminder is continue to work on your school work and your coursework. We are about a month away till the end of the program. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And if you would like to schedule time with me, also happy to meet with you to go to create any sort of plan to catch up on coursework as well. But other than that, that is everything I have for you all. Any final questions? Okay. Well, we'll let you all go. Thank you everyone for joining today. Have a good evening. Thanks everyone.